Let's begin with opening statements. Each of you has 1 minute. We're going to start with Congressman DeSantis.
Well, thanks, Jake. Let me say hello to my wife, Casey, who's here. You know, we have 2 kids under 2, and when you're out on the campaign trail, it's very difficult, and she manages to hold it all together. So I love you and thank you. I am Ron DeSantis. I'm an Iraq veteran. I'm a former prosecutor, and I'm on a mission to protect Florida's future for a generation. We need to protect the economic momentum that we've enjoyed, but you can't do that if you do what Andrew wants to do, which is to raise taxes 40% and introduce a lot of new taxes. That will stop our economy. That will cost jobs. I also think we need to protect our environment and clean our water, restore the Everglades, and fight red tide. I've been endorsed by Everglades Trust. I'm the guy that can get that done. And I also want to protect our communities. That means standing with law enforcement. That means fighting sanctuary cities. That means not allowing the opioid peddlers to get their way. Look, Andrew's a failed mayor. He's presided over a crime-ridden city. He's involved in corruption. He's not the guy that lead our state. I've worn the uniform. I've protected our communities. I've stood for taxpayers. As governor, I'll stand for you, and I will protect Florida's future.
Mayor Gillum.
Indeed. Well, that was a mouthful. My name is Andrew Gillum. In addition to being the mayor of Florida's capital city, I'm the proud husband to my wife, RJ, who's here this evening, dad to my 3 children, Davis, Jackson, and Caroline, son to my mother, Frances, who was a school bus driver while I was growing up, and my daddy, Charles, who was a construction worker. The 5th of 7 children and the first of my siblings to graduate from high school and the first to graduate from college. I'm here this evening standing for anybody who has ever been told that they don't belong, that they didn't come from the right background or the right pedigree. I'm here fighting for everyday Floridians so that this is a state that works for all of us again. I'm honored to be the Democratic nominee for governor, but more importantly, I'm extremely proud to be a Floridian. And if you give me the opportunity to serve, I promise to work every day on behalf of everyday Floridians. Thanks, and I'm looking forward to a very engaged conversation.
Thank you to both of you. Congressman DeSantis, Florida is still recovering from the devastating impact of Hurricane Michael, with at least 26 Floridians killed. There is scientific consensus that warmer waters from climate change are making hurricanes stronger, as well as a stark warning that the world just received from the United Nations about climate change. You recently said that you're not a climate change believer. I'm sorry, you're not a climate change denier, but you don't want to be labeled a believer in climate change. Given the threats Florida faces from intense hurricanes and rising sea levels, don't Florida voters deserve to know where you stand on this issue?
Well, what I said was I don't want to be an alarmist. I mean, I want to look at this and do what makes sense for Florida. So, for example, for the people of Northwest Florida, I will be there for you. You guys are resilient. You're fighting. This was a terrible storm, and we will rebuild. But I also think you have to just look at facts. The fact is, you look at South Florida, we need to do resiliency. You have more water. You have flooding. So as governor, that's something that I'm going to take on full throttle. What I don't want to do is do what things like Andrew wants to do, which is do a California-style energy policy that will cause our electricity rates to skyrocket 20, 30%. That's going to hurt senior citizens on a fixed income. That'll hurt our blue-collar workers. So let's deal with the issues that we can deal with. I'm somebody who has a plan to fix, to stop the toxic algae that's been spewing into our rivers, to divert that south of the lake, restore the Everglades, and restore Florida Bay. We can get that done. I think I'm the candidate that can get that done. And I think now's the time to do it, because if we don't take action over the next 4 years, I don't know if we're ever going to be able to restore the Everglades to their rightful place.
Mayor Gillum?
Well, first, what Florida voters need to know is that when they elect me governor, they're going to have a governor who believes in science, which we haven't had for quite some time in this state. I'm not sure what is so California about believing that the state of Florida ought to lead in solar energy. We're known as the Sunshine State. At the very least, what we can do is be a global leader here. We got to teach the other 49 states of what to do and what it means to have a state that, quite frankly, leans into the challenges of the green economy and builds one, and at the same time builds an economy that lasts. I'm proud that the same week that Donald Trump pulled out of the Paris Accord, I broke ground in my city on a 120-acre solar farm, tripling the amount of solar energy that we produce. We're prepared to lead, and we've done so in my city, and we'll do so for the state.
Mayor Gillum, you have a TV ad calling, quote, toxic air, red tide, and algae blooms here in Florida, an economic and environmental disaster. Obviously, people are getting sick and marine life is washing up dead on Florida's beaches. You blame in this commercial corporate profits and special interests. Under the Gillum administration, which industries should be put on notice right now, And what will they have to change?
Yeah, well, I'll say first, the industries that need to be put on notice are the ones that have given my opponent over $300,000, some of the biggest polluters in this state. As the mayor of Tallahassee, we have a spray field. When we learned that that spray field was dumping high levels of nitrates into our groundwater and toxifying the Wakulla Springs, we went and began to treat that facility at the tertiary level. The truth is that there is not one singular issue and interest responsible for some of the climate adjustments and some of the blue-green algae. Not only is it agriculture that plays a role, but it's also some of the hyperdevelopment taking place north of Lake Okeechobee. We've got to deal with all of that in this state. And as governor, because these are not the interests funding me, I'm going to have the courage of my conviction to hold those folks who are the biggest polluters accountable and responsible for the degradation of our environment. For 20 years, we've handed over the keys of environmental protection in this state to, quite frankly, again, the biggest corporate polluters. We're going to hold them accountable because this is our air, our water, our beaches, our oceans, and there's not a profit margin in this state big enough to take control of that.
That's some interesting revisionist history. I ran in the Republican primary stressing the need for clean water. I stood up to the most entrenched interests in Florida. I had $17 million spent against me, many of that from people who opposed my view on cleaning up our water. I was the one that got White House approval for the federal component of the Southern Reservoir, which we will get online, we will build, because what you need to do is you need to send water into that reservoir, clean it, send it south to the Everglades and Florida Bay, so you're not discharging the polluted water into the Caloosahatchee and St. Lucie estuaries. I'll be able to get that done. Now, Andrew wants to impeach Donald Trump. You got to be able to work with the administration because you have to work with the Army Corps. You got to know the key people in the administration. Otherwise, we're never going to be able to solve the problem.
Thank you, Congressman.
I'm the only guy that can do it.
Well, I think it's worth noting that the former member of Congress voted 33 times while a member of Congress against clean water. In Washington, D.C., I think some of the largest environmental groups gave him 3 out of 100. Now, I went to school in Gainesville, Florida, with people who never went to class. They never got a 3. The congressman couldn't do any better than that.
So why did I get endorsed by Everglades Trust?
I appreciate the fact that he is an election year environmentalist.
Oh, yeah, right.
But his record is going to come to bear in the race because you can't flip what has been 6 years of environmental disregard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Go ahead, Congressman.
Well, I'm endorsed by the Everglades Trust. That's the gold standard. One of the few Republicans that's been able to do it. I have the scars from fighting this fight. And when he talks about these environmental votes, I don't want to shut down like the coal industry in West Virginia. For Florida, I've always been there, whether it's Everglades restoration, whether it's fighting toxic algae, whether it's fighting the red tide. I've been there every step of the way, and that's why I've been recognized, and that's why I've been endorsed, and Andrew has not.
The board of the Everglades Foundation is made up of 3 people. That same board gave $250,000 to the Republican Party of the state of Florida, and one of the 3 board members then dissented and joined me. I'm endorsed by a number of environmental organizations, some of the national leading ones, because of my record, not what I'm saying in a campaign, but what I've actually done as mayor.
I'd like to turn to health care, if I could, Mayor.